Our first question for tonight goes, Dear Luang Por, thank you for the Dhamma teaching today. May I know why do I feel saddened when I am spending time idling with my parents-in-law, talking about things that have passed? I feel that time should be spent prudently, as death is only one breath away. I hope to start a meaningful conversation with them to lead towards life, to keep to the precepts, and not just seeking out, like going where to eat or shop. I am really sorry to see that people these days are often seeking out rather than seeking in. Would Luang Por have any advice for me?
Well, I think it's a good point, and most people are facing the same issue. We're surrounded by a world of people who, most of them are not practicing meditation, I think. It's only a smaller number who practice meditation. There are a lot of good people in the world. I'm not saying there's no goodness in the world, but unfortunately the untrained mind tends to spend a lot of time seeking out more trivial pursuits, food and shopping and chit-chatting out, just sort of passing the time. So, sometimes you have compassion for others, but you have to have compassion for yourself as well. Well, get on with your own practice. So if you see the benefit of Dhamma practice, well, start establishing your own personal routine. Doesn't mean to say you neglect your in-laws or other people around you, but establish your own routines of listening to Dhamma, meditating, supporting Sangha if you can is a good thing in whatever way you can. If you go and offer food to Sangha or go and visit Sangha, you tend to get a boost for your practice. If you go to a place where they practice meditation, keep the rules of discipline, it tends to uplift us, and we hear some good Dhamma and practice some generosity and developing ourselves in a number of ways. That's a good thing to commit to. That doesn't mean to say you neglect your in-laws, but get on with your own practice. Like you say, time is running out for all of us. We don't know how long we've got, so use your time well to the best of your ability.
Sadhu Luang Por. So we have a raised hand, and you may ask your question.
Hi Ajahn, thank you so much. My name is Vandana, I live in California. So I've been listening to your talks and very inspired. I'm a practitioner practicing for 5-6 years now. And my question to you is, what you suggest when mind is always want to stay in samadhi, and even if you want to keep your eyes open when you're not doing anything, and you just want to sit and look around and see your mind's movement, but mind wants your eyes to be closed and go into that state. So I'm trying to challenge myself to just stay being completely, eyes are open, looking around, and try to see within with the open eyes, but somehow it's not happening. I just have to close my eyes. So am I running away from something, or what is going on? Thank you.
Well, I think you have to ask yourself that question at the different times where you say you have a strong urge to close your eyes. So obviously there are times it's probably appropriate to close your eyes if you're doing some formal meditation. Most people find it helpful to close the eyes because when you leave your eyes open, it's easy to be distracted by what's going on around you. That's when you're doing some formal sitting meditation. But say you're doing walking meditation, obviously you keep your eyes open, so you can always walk slowly back and forth. And then, of course, much of the day you're not doing formal meditation, your eyes are open and you're doing things. So the Buddha encouraged us to be restrained and composed in the way we use our eyes. So get to know yourself, get to know your weaknesses. So, nowadays, I don't know about you, but younger people, they've all got a phone or a computer, so they're endlessly scrolling and doing stuff on their phone. But that's using the eyes and always going to the computer or the phone screen. So sometimes you also have to stop doing that, put the phone down and, what am I doing, where am I, what's going on? We have to develop more clear comprehension and all-round awareness of different situations. Use our eyes well. Observe what we're using the eyes to look at. And sometimes we look at stuff that's not very healthy for us, not very, that stimulates a lot of very coarse states of mind perhaps, or just distracts us. So we have to get to know ourselves and how to be more restrained, more mindful with the way we use our eyes. You probably use your eyes maybe 70% of the time in terms of senses. They're our main sense. And so there's a big area of study or learning for us. So there's nothing wrong with using your eyes, like you say. Try to be mindful as you're looking and seeing, and just know where you are, know your posture, know the activity you're involved with, and how you can use your eyes wisely so you're not getting lost into unwholesome states of mind, but endlessly looking at stuff that you like, so it stimulates greed, or looking in a very negative way at other people, finding fault with them. Depends on your character, but your eyes can be the doorway for Dhamma. When you establish mindfulness and reflect on impermanence and reflect on the Dhamma in different ways, your eyes can be a doorway for good things to arise, but it can also be a doorway for the mental defilements of greed and anger, delusion to arise too. So that's why we have to practice what we call indriya samvara, sense restraint, establish mindfulness as we're looking. Same with the ears, taste, touch, smell, all our senses. But sometimes it is good, like you say, sometimes just you're sitting there with not much to do, rather than picking up a phone or turning on a machine or talking to someone, practice just sitting. Your eyes are open and you're maybe looking ahead or whatever, but practice just sitting with yourself sometimes. Because a lot of people in the world never do that, even for 1 minute. They don't know how to just sit still, be content and peaceful with themselves as a human being. And especially with technology now, it's just your mind goes straight to the technology perhaps as soon as there's a free moment. So I'd recommend, try it, doing periods of time, maybe just short periods where you can maintain your mindfulness, say 5 minutes, just sitting 5 minutes with your eyes open, not doing anything particular, but being aware of looking. That's one way to train mindfulness. Just be aware of what you're seeing, what reactions are coming up. How well do you maintain mindfulness as you're looking for a few minutes? Just observe yourself and learn about that. You could try that as an experiment.
Thank you so much.
Okay, our next question is from the same questioner, the first questioner. So, as a practitioner, I see a struggle to blend into the worldly life with relatives and friends who are often seeking out. How do we then walk towards the middle path and see it as it is? I have been pondering a lot about karma today. One will need to have a good and supportive karma in order for one to be willing to practice or even learn to listen to the Dhamma. Seeking Ajahns guidance here on my cravings to reduce my suffering when I am with them. I know clearly it's my expectations that causes me to suffer. Thank you.
Metta, metta, metta. Family, relatives, friends, everyone has their different character. Some have a lot of faith in Buddhism, some have no faith in Buddhism. But you need metta, just to live with other human beings. If you develop a lot of metta, kindness, compassion, this will help things to go better. So we do have obligations to family, sometimes responsibilities. There's people we may have to help or care for. So consider that. Maybe divide, you learn when you have time, how much time and energy you have for your Dhamma practice, which is maybe more, on your own. And then when you need to be with your family or help them, but turn it into part of your Dhamma practice. So if you have to help elderly relatives or assist younger people, it doesn't matter. When you're giving time to the family, do it with an attitude of metta, helping. You don't have to judge them. If that's your character, to always be judging them, oh, they don't keep the precepts, or they don't respect the Buddha, they don't practice Dhamma. Well, get to know your own habit and see how you're making yourself unhappy and getting caught into unwholesome states when you do that. Try and change it. Bring up metta, more tolerance. See if you can introduce Dhamma into your relationships with other people, but without forcing it on them and without making it a problem. But just, how can you practice the Dhamma with people who don't have faith in the Buddha? Every human being will respond to kindness in a good way, so you can introduce more kindness into your family relations, your friends. Just because other people do things that are maybe not very skillful in their speech, their actions, doesn't mean to say you have to do that. So always be coming back to say, well, I'll do my practice, and if they're not practicing around me, they're not doing it in the same way as me, well, I'll accept that. That's their choice. They're right. So try not to get caught into endlessly judging or finding fault with people. And metta will help you there. What does metta mean? It means kindness, loving kindness that you develop, and you sort of basically see everyone as more like, just a family member, and they may have their faults, just as we have faults, they have faults, but you don't make a lot of suffering out of these things. You just know them for the way they are, and you wish them well. Always come back to that wishing well, and then it makes it a bit easier to live with people who don't practice the Dhamma.
Sadhu Lumpur. We are getting quite a lot of questions coming in through tonight, so we'll
Shorter answers then.
see how we go. So next question goes, Dear Lumpur, could you guide further advice more on childhood trauma, the fear of abandonment and rejection further amplified in relationships in adulthood, resulting in trauma, bonding, addicted to pain, suffering? Thank you.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, sometimes our practice can be hard work, facing up to childhood trauma and lingering stuff when we're an adult. But I'd use the Dhamma to deal with all this stuff. Practice dana regularly, develop metta in your daily life, kindness, keep the precepts, do some mindfulness meditation, listen to the Dhamma. This is giving you all the tools and the skills to face whatever karma you've accumulated and deal with it. It's possible. Everything can become part of your Dhamma practice. So trauma is something to be mindful of, and work out how to be patient and mindful as strong emotions come up, unpleasant memories come up. But make it, your goal to practice the Dhamma through whatever emotions and trauma you've accumulated. And if you are developing skillful states of mind as you're practicing, even if old trauma comes up as memories or habits that affect your speech, your behavior, just be very patient with that and keep reminding yourself to let go, not to follow the unwholesome ways, and to cultivate the wholesome ways.
Sadhu. Next question. Dear Ajahn, what do you mean by this fear thrives onto attachment? Is it when one is fearful, hence one is always clinging onto things or people?
Yeah, well, when we're not so aware, we identify with our thoughts, our feelings, our memories, our perceptions as self. So that makes them very real. That's what clinging is, isn't it? You're holding on to them in your mind. Whereas you establish mindfulness, you're starting to not cling, you're starting to let go. So there's a sense of distance. So you know the fearful feeling as it arises, but you don't indulge it, hold on to it, indulge it, make it worse, keep it longer in your mind than it needs to be there. So stuff comes up, but if you're mindful, maybe that stuff will pass away very quickly. When you're not so mindful, you feed it, you make it worse, you add on to it, you add more chapters to the story, as it were. So the more you can establish awareness and mindfulness in the present moment, the quicker you'll be able to let these things pass and you'll be free from them. What does fear do when you attach to it? It paralyzes you. You can't think, you can't act. You're stuck because of that attachment. As you start to become mindful, you say, oh, this is an unpleasant situation and I feel terrible, but I can still think, I can still decide things, do things. You're less paralyzed once mindfulness comes up. So you have to practice to bring up the mindfulness.
Sadhu. Next question. I often hear that the unconditional and deathless can be observed through conscious awareness. Could you please explain how this is possible, given that consciousness is listed as one of the 5 aggregates of clinging?
You have to use the 5 aggregates because that's what you've got, but you're training within these 5 aggregates that you have. Your body, your mind, your thought formations, your karma, your intentions, your perceptions, and your sense consciousness. You're using all this as the raw materials for training the mind. So like mindfulness is a sankhara. It's part of your 5 khandhas. Samadhi is part of your 5 khandhas. Consciousness is. But you can use these things. You're training the mind to be mindful, to know itself. So as you're practicing, you're using what you have, this body, this mind, you're a human being, but you're constantly letting go of delusions and attachments that cloud our thinking and make us make more karma and make us suffer more. You're constantly clearing that away through the power of your awareness to the point where maybe you clear away all of this process of attachment and identification. If you keep clearing away enough, it doesn't return. So keep using what you got, your own body and mind. You have to accept that. But the Buddha said, well, it's possible human beings can completely abandon this clinging to the 5 khandhas as self. It's the idea of self and this self-identification we're letting go of. So you have to keep investigating that. Use your mind to investigate itself. Difficult, but can be done.
Sadhu. Next question. The Buddha provided detailed instructions for mindfulness of breathing meditation, but the guidance on Metta meditation seems less detailed. Could you kindly instruct on the proper way to practice Metta meditation?
Well, actually, there's quite a lot of detail in the Karaniya Metta Sutta, for one, and then there's other suttas, and Your metta is practiced on many levels: body, speech, mind. So just keeping precepts, living in a moral way, abandoning unwholesome ways of action and speech is already metta, I would say. It kind of pervades the whole of the Buddha's teachings, metta, compassion. It's probably later commentaries and teachers that have given you the techniques of metta meditation that are often employed today, and I sometimes give that as well. You can go to our YouTube channel, there's some teachings on metta meditation there. But actually I think the Buddha's teachings do tell us how to practice metta, but you just have to listen more, study more. And the aim is to keep metta in mind, be mindful of the thought of non-ill will, non-harming, non-anger. Just keep that in mind. Partly it's also just an understanding thing, isn't it? Understanding that the way of anger never leads to the end of suffering. The way of anger creates more suffering. It's the easy way to follow your anger, indulge it, and hurt yourself, hurt others, live with suffering. That's the easy way. The hard way is resist it, to let it go, not give into it, and develop forgiveness, tolerance, kindness, the way of metta. That's the hard way, so you have to put a lot of effort into it.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. I recently started to feel that lying and stealing are the same thing. When someone steals something from others, they actually lie to everyone in a silent way. But their action is more brutal than lying, and there's no shame in integrity. But Buddha said lying is the most unwholesome act. When someone lies, there's no other evil they can't do. And how can we not despise someone with a low standard of morality, especially when staying in the monastery?
Reflect on karma is a very useful thing to do. So we live with people in the world with varying standards of morality. Some lie, some don't. Some people lie occasionally, some people lie a lot. Some people steal, some people don't. That's normal. But if you reflect on karma, anyone who is caught into lying or stealing, and they're often obviously very closely related, but they're not exactly the same thing, but they're closely related, because people who steal are often very deceptive and tell lies. They're creating the causes for their suffering. It's not going to be good for them. Whether you're talking in the more conventional sense, there may be consequences with the police or the people who they've stolen from getting angry and coming after them. Their own peace of mind is eroded by their actions. Or on the bigger picture, you're creating karma that will come back on you, and you steal or you lie, you lose self-respect, you lose other people's respect. All kinds of problems ensue in the future as a result of these acts, unwholesome acts. So reflect on that. These people are heading towards suffering because of their lying and stealing. So actually the correct way of viewing it might be compassion. You feel sorry for them. Oh, why are they doing that? They're going to suffer so much for it. If you can bring your mind to see that, then you'll be letting go of your own anger that leads you to despise them. And also you may be able to think of solutions to help change them if it's possible. There's a lot of people to change in the world, so you won't be able to change them all. But if it's someone close to you or a situation that's close to you, maybe you can, when you establish mindfulness, you set aside your anger. Maybe you can think straight what you need to do in this situation to somehow help that person or improve them. Improvements in yourself and others is not going to come from anger or hatred. It's going to come from goodwill and a wish to improve, from a positive intention, not from a wish to punish or harm.
Sadhu Lumpur. Another question. Ajahn, will you give short-term ordination to females in the future?
I give short-term ordination to females every year. We have a retreat the last week of December every year, and we give ordination of the 8 precepts to the females. So far, that's all we managed. We haven't even finished the accommodation for the females yet. So one step at a time. There are places where females can ordain in Australia and around the world. So anyone who's ready can head off to those places. We'll give you support, whatever we can, give you teachings and support. But we don't have female monastics here at the moment.
Sadhu Lumpur. Another question. Dear Lumpur, where does the mind reside? Is it limited to this body, or does it extend outside? Usually people point to the brain or physical heart. Others say that there is the mind element. Thank you.
Yeah, the mind that you can kind of point to is probably not the unconditioned mind, that's the conditioned mind. So the mind and the body are linked. Obviously, a human being, when they're alive, there's a mind and a body there. Usually say the seat of the mind when you're alive is, the hati, what they call the hatiya watu, the heart base. When the mind leaves the body, that's where it leaves from, say at death. But the mind, the unconditioned mind, is just this quality of knowing that's, it's not a person or a being, it's just nature. But the problem is because of the presence of ignorance, kilesas form, greed, anger, delusion, craving, and attachment form, and these take over the mind, take the mind to be a self. And then you get birth of a human being, and then all the associated karma that human beings make, some good, some bad, and you get more birth and then more death and then more birth and death, what we call samsara. As long as the mind is conditioned by ignorance and kilesa, defilements, that will continue. But say for an arahant who's seen through all these delusions, they've abandoned the attachments to the 5 khandhas and the sense of self, well, they don't get reborn, there's no more rebirth. So then the mind goes back to what you might call, you just said, the mind element. But it's not something you need to point to as though it's a place or it's, describe. It's the quality of knowing that is no longer defiled by ignorance.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. Dear Ajahn, recently I attended an intensive meditation retreat and I experienced some hallucinations. I've always benefited from meditation and retreats, but now I have some fears of meditation. Would Ajahn have any advice? Sadhu.
Well, talk to somebody about it. If you're on a retreat and there was a guide, a teacher, then talk to them. Tell them what's happening. That's always the best thing to do. I don't know exactly what happened for you because your description's fairly brief there, so I'm not sure I can give you specific advice, but get some advice. Talk to an experienced meditator, probably the one who you're on retreat with, and find out what's going on, whether your approach to the meditation is wrong or needs adjusting in some way. I don't know, were you going without sleep or going without food? Sometimes people, you might say, try too hard in meditation. they want to achieve certain things, certain results, so they really force the mind and they push themselves to the point where they, sometimes they become psychotic or have hallucinations. It does happen. So maybe your approach needs to be looked at and adjusted. Sometimes people need to stop meditating if they're doing it in the wrong way. Completely stop and just do more what we call mindful activity, where you're doing things, practicing mindfulness, but you're doing more ordinary things, acts of service, kindness, useful things, whether it's at home or on a retreat or in a monastery or wherever. Practicing mindfulness, but not in an intense way, because on a retreat often you're doing it in this intense way, many hours of sitting and walking, and if someone hasn't quite got the right understanding, then it can lead to some mental imbalances, things going wrong. So I would get advice first off from the people teaching the meditation. If that doesn't work, maybe even see a GP or someone. I can't give you any more specific advice yet because I don't know the details of what you experienced.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. Dear Ajahn, thank you very much for the Dhamma sharing. My question is, when I meditate, sometimes at the beginning of the meditation, I keep wanting to swallow saliva. Sometimes I find it disturbing. However, it disappeared eventually. Is this abnormal?
No, it's very common. When you sit down to meditate, many people will get, first of all, or in the early period of their meditation, they're distracted by different body functions. So saliva is a very common one, swallowing. Sometimes it's the breath itself, the way the breath is, the rhythm of the breath. The breath is short, long, coarse, refined. They become a little bit too obsessed with the breath or the saliva, or sometimes it's the heart, just feeling the heart beating because you're now still with not a lot of distractions. So the body becomes more aware to you, and it can be irritating, it can be kind of distracting in one way or another. But as you say, if you keep meditating, you'll find the body settles down and you'll forget about it. And that's fine. Just forget about it. Once your mind is more settled on the meditation object or reflecting on a theme or whatever, then the body, these sort of little sensations and things going on in the body won't bother you. And it sounds like you've already worked that out, you've realized that. So just keep meditating, and eventually the saliva problem will probably just disappear altogether. It'll never bother you again. My first problem was itching. Endless itching in the body, always stopping, scratching, getting upset with the itching. But I just pushed on until I no longer itched and it never came back. I mean, I still itch occasionally, but it never bothers me, not like it did the first sort of few weeks of meditating.
Sadhu Lumpur. Another question. Dear Ajahn Kalyano, will you be in Warburton Monastery this Friday, 27th of September? My friends and I would like to pay our respects to you.
If I'm not taken ill and carted to hospital and I'm not dead, and if the world doesn't end, then I'll probably be here. I'm supposed to be here because we actually got a meditation program that day, so I'll be here. Yep.
Sadhu. Another question. Dear Lumpur, I had an unpleasant experience with the teaching of an ex-nun. Once she told me I will be stuck in my practice because I had made a bodhisattva's path vow and I have to follow. But I told her I'm following the Buddha's teaching. Luang Por, will I create any bad karma for the unpleasant feelings and thoughts because she is a renounced person? Will I also get stuck in the practice because of not following a past vow? Sadhu.
First of all, we'll just forgive whoever it was. The question's so long, it's getting hard to remember all the details of each question. But this ex-nun, if there's any bad feeling towards her, just forgive her and move on. And don't hold on to such petty things. Maybe you didn't get on well with this ex-nun, okay? These things happen. Just forgive her, move on, don't hold a grudge. Focus your mind on the Dhamma, let go of the past. And even, bodhisattva path or following the Buddha's teachings, in the end they're the same thing. So whether you're practicing bodhisattva path or following the Buddha's words, you should be establishing your mind in wholesome dhammas, keeping the precepts, practicing mindfulness, cultivating generosity and compassion, and then developing insight into the impermanence, suffering and not self of phenomena. And I would just set aside the whole question of bodhisattva path or Buddha path for the moment and just get the basics of your practice established. And then most people find these questions resolve themselves. And if you're practicing sincerely in a wholesome way, don't worry. It's not bad karma, it's good karma. And we're all learning, so sometimes we change. It's not unusual to be very inspired in one period of your life and make a kind of vow or a plan, I'm going to do this. But then later you change. People change. Everything is impermanent. So I wouldn't worry too much about past vows and past practices. Focus more on the present and contemplate to make sure your mind is in a wholesome state and you're not holding on to any grudges. Let the past go.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Dear Luang Por, how to bring awareness and keep it when experiencing long-term strong physical pain, and how to practice patience in this situation? Sometimes meditation becomes even more difficult as the intensity of pain causes anxiety. What is the right view and the right effort to have in this case? Thank you.
Yeah, sounds difficult. Probably need to develop a few different strategies, I'd say, depending on how bad the pain is or how intense it is. So if it's mild pain, well, maybe you can meditate in a more normal way on the breath and see if you can really focus your mind on the breath during your meditation and see the pain as just a feeling, and not be bothered by it and maintain your equanimity. That might be your sort of basic practice. But as the pain intensifies, it may be too difficult to meditate, put your mind on the breath, anything like that. So yes, you'll have to remind yourself just to be very patient, maybe reflect on the fact that, if it's a pain you can't change, you can't get rid of, just to work more maybe on your attitude to the pain, the way you're thinking about it. Try to accept it as just an unfortunate karma that you're having to live with and be with, and try and keep your mind in a wholesome state. However difficult it is, try not to go into negativity, self-aversion, aversion for others, blaming yourself. I know there's a lot of people who have intense pain often say, oh, I'm a bad person, I must have done bad things in the past, now I have this problem. It may be a natural kind of reaction, but it doesn't help. You have to learn just to accept what's happened has happened. You have this pain, okay. And focus your mind on the positive in the present moment and stop dwelling in the past, if that's what you're doing. Try to focus on what's still good in your life. There may be many good things in your life that when you think of brings you some joy. So okay, you have the pain and maybe you can't get rid of the pain, but maybe there's some people helping you, something to be joyful of. If you're in Australia, maybe you have a good Medicare system with doctors and nurses helping you. Good. You have the Dhamma to help you. You have the ability maybe to listen to Dhamma, reflect on the Dhamma, hear the teachings. That's something to be grateful of. Think of the people who have helped you in your life, your parents, your friends, doctors, whoever, people who have helped you up to this point in your life. Something to be grateful for, appreciative of. So try not to dwell on the pain in a negative way with the negative thoughts, but go towards things that are more positive, more uplifting. And this may help you through the periods when it's very intense.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Dear Ajahn, is it true that when one is no longer judgmental to oneself or others, one is therefore then practicing metta? I'm wondering, will hormone changes within oneself affect one to exercise metta towards others and self?
Well, obviously our body affects us all the time, so if you have pain or hormone changes or any kind of changes, it can make life difficult, maybe pain, discomfort, which will affect your state of mind. Maybe you lose your metta. So people tend to lose their metta when they're tired or in pain also. So yes, you have to be careful of that. Work hard to maintain mindfulness, be careful, get more rest, look after yourself when you're tired or when the body is not in a good state. What was the first part of the question? Can you just keep the question still there, then I can read it? No longer judgmental of others or oneself, therefore one is practicing metta. Yeah, could be. I assume this word judgmental, you mean fault-finding. Yes, when you practice metta, you may be aware of other people's faults or your own faults, but you're not dwelling on them with aversion. You may be learning about them. What can I do to improve this? Or if it's someone else, is there anything I can do to help them? If not, you may just have to be more equanimous. Metta leads on to equanimity. So sometimes you just have to accept things the way they are in yourself or others. But also metta is a positive force for goodwill and for improvement. So if there is something you can do to improve yourself or others, good. But don't just dwell, fault-finding, it makes yourself very miserable, negative, and you look at others and you're negative, look at yourself, negative, you're not happy, are you? And maybe it damages your relations as well. So try and keep up the metta and maybe supported by equanimity, upekkha as well.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. In Mahayana, there are many stories that say about the punishment from doing unskillful things. So can we assume when someone steals something from the monastery continuously for a decade, could they be reborn into a, say, kitchen mouse or similar kind of animal?
No, you can't assume that because you don't know. But you can assume there'll be some karma, resultant karma for them, of course. Usually they say if you steal regularly from monasteries, you're reborn as a hungry ghost because it's such heavy karma. Quite common. We had that once in the monastery in Thailand. There was one lady who was actually hired to help the monastery kitchen, but because there was food stores and things there, she kept stealing, taking home. I mean, she was poor, but she was taking too much, you might say. And so this is what Ajahn Luang Por Anand said, her mind has become the mind of a preta, a hungry ghost. If she dies now or she doesn't change her ways, that's where she'll be going. And hungry ghosts have a lot of suffering. and they can be in that realm for a long time. It's just not a good outcome. So in the end we had to ask her to leave the monastery, at least to minimize the temptation. Sometimes that's all you can do with someone who has the habit to steal. You can't stop them stealing, but you minimize the temptation, put them somewhere else or take them away. It's one thing you can do. So it just depends on the person whether you can help them or not. But yeah, it's not guaranteed. Maybe be reborn as an animal also, that's possible. Maybe as a hungry ghost, that's probably more likely. But in the present moment also, suffering. Where the hungry ghost comes from, they come from people who have the mind of a hungry ghost. And you can be a human being with the mind of a hungry ghost. If you're endlessly greedy or stealing from people who don't harm anyone and you're just stealing from them, taking advantage of them, your mind is going to go to a very dark place, unfortunately.
Sadhu Lumpur. That may be our last question for tonight, unless anyone has any other further questions.
Seem to be a lot of questions about stealing from monasteries tonight. Try to be honest, endure. If you're poor, just take the Dhamma as your wealth. You don't need a lot of money to live in this world, just enough to get by is good enough.
Sadhu. So we will end the session there. Does Lumpur have any final words?
Thank you for listening and joining in the session tonight. We wish you well with your Dhamma practice, and we'll see you again next time.